Well, good afternoon. Thank you, Prime Minister, for the speech. As you were speaking, the questions were coming in. I think we've got about 50 questions through here. So I think we'll want to make sure we save the time for that as we go through it. What I wanted to do is start by asking several questions myself, and then we'll open it up to the audience out here. There's some microphones that are set up. If you could just say, who you are, where you're from, and please make it a question, not a speech. We'll then go through it. And then we've also got Slido, so if you can fire in any more questions, I'll try and synthesize some of them up, and then we'll fire them off to you. So, Prime Minister, just a very clear, practical view about what smart nation means from Singapore. The first question I wanted to ask is thinking about opportunities. We have a lot of people in the audience from around the world and around the region. So maybe thinking a bit about ASEAN. You mentioned in your speech, 240 billion increase because of the digital economy. Just as you look at the ASEAN region, and Jenny Lee in a previous panel talking about that this is the sort of the new area of opportunity after thinking about the US and China. What sectors or themes do you get most excited about?
Well, first of all, ASEAN as a region is doing quite well economically. It's growing steadily. The government's generally stable and focused on economic development. And with middle classes, with purchasing power, and who want quality of life. And quality of life which can, in many cases, be delivered by digital services. So you see there's considerable excitement in already, certainly Indonesia, in Vietnam, in Thailand. We are trying to generate some buzz in Singapore. And I think other ASEAN countries will also be on the same bus before long, because the purchasing power is there, the opportunities are there, and the tech groups, the tech players and the startups are coming in. And ASEAN as a group is working together to develop cooperation in these areas, because traditional economic cooperation we've been doing for a long time. We talk about FTAs, we talk about investment agreements. These are we've plucked all the low-hanging fruit. But if we're talking about new areas of cooperation in IT, for example, linking up all the cities which call themselves smart cities in ASEAN. And we made a project of this last year when we were ASEAN chairman. We made an ASEAN Smart Cities network. So you sign on to the network and you can share projects together, you can link up with one another, you can link up with third parties in Japan or Australia or US and do projects with them. And it's been a tremendous success. I think we've got 30, 40 countries now, cities now, 40? About 30-ish. Anyway, we said one per country, and that was not sustainable. There are 10 countries, so it means that people think it's worthwhile to join into the network and to get on the tech bus. So that's one thing which is happening. The other thing which we are doing, which will, we hope, help not just Singapore but the region, is to work on what we call a digital economic partnership agreement. It's a kind of new age FTA to cover traditional IT issues like data security, data standards, like privacy rules, and also new areas like when you're talking about AI, what rules should apply. We're talking about cybersecurity, how we can work together. But put all these together into a coherent agreement, and then that will enable us to work together across boundaries. We are pioneering this. We are starting, in this case, outside of ASEAN, with New Zealand and Chile. They are far-flung, but in cyberspace, it doesn't matter where you are.
So Singapore and New Zealand?
Singapore, New Zealand, and Chile as a threesome.
Very interesting.
It's
anyone from New Zealand here? Yeah, there you go.
It sounds odd, but the TPP started like that.
Yeah.
Exactly like that. We started Singapore, New Zealand, Chile, and Brunei, And it was far-flung, but we thought that this was the nucleus. And from that, we grew the TPP. One day, we lost one big participant. But we still have the CPTPP. So this little thing, I hope, will grow.
Excellent. But are there any sort of sectors, or you think about education, health, or everything's going to get affected by this? Any areas that?
Well, I think retail is certainly already being affected. I judge by my family, and I think many others. I see so many parcels arriving in the mail, and not big things, little things. A connector, a cable, a little device, and instead of going down to the neighborhood shop, you order it and it's come to you from across the world. I think to go with that, logistics will be affected too. Both the operation of the logistics and also the support of the e-commerce business. We've got logistics operations in Singapore. People have set up smart warehouses where it's basically lights out and the boxes move around on their own, and you optimize which are the boxes which need to be near the front and which ones can go to the back of the warehouse. We also have live things, or anyway, fresh things being sold. For example, we have some of our restaurants doing fish, seafood, trading seafood, and you're trading seafood online, B2B. I don't know how you deliver the prawns and the crabs, but anyway, you have some standards. You can do the business online, and you don't have to go down to Tsukiji Market and look at it physically and poke it. And it's a way to do things. So I think retail is going to be an area. Education, I'm not so sure yet, because, I know there's people talk about massively online education schemes, but in the end, you still need some degree of human interaction. I think certainly in healthcare, we are looking to use IT in a much bigger way. Yeah.
And on the regulation, in your speech, you mentioned on the fintech side, and the MAS is very much encouraging these regulatory sandboxes. Do you think that will happen in other sectors as well, just allowing people to experiment with new ways of?
I think in other sectors it will be less regulated. In finance, you're always worried about systemic stability, about consumer protection, and it has been traditionally very tightly controlled. And when you have let go and gone too far, like in London, sometimes we run into difficulties. So when some new animal like this comes along, like fintech, or a big thing comes along like Libra, all the regulators and supervisors sit up and say, just hang on a minute. This is, we are very interested in you, can we have a conversation? At the same time, if you raise your eyebrows too often, nothing will happen. So you've got to know how to let things start to happen and to control it at the right point. It can change very fast. You look at the way in China, Alibaba or Tencent, because they went into payments, suddenly became very big players in the money markets and then as banks. And there are significant concerns which you have to deal with.
So, but basically, it sounds like there is a lot of opportunity in ASEAN. I should broaden that. New Zealand and Chile as well. We'll add into the picture. But just to talk a bit about some of the challenges, and not, you mentioned this a bit in your Shangri-La talk. Hank Paulson's written an op-ed today about
Yes.
the economic iron curtain. Splinter net is a word that's being used. How should we think about that, given this 600 million people in this region, a lot of opportunity? Any advice of how to?
Well, we are not in a position to advise, but we are being carried along for the ride, whether we like it or not. And we hope that the persons in charge of the ships consider carefully what exactly they want to do. There's two big ships, and if they collide, it's a lot of trouble for both parties. And there's a lot of trouble for everybody else too, because in Asia, all of the countries have got very major economic links with China and very major ties with America. And if the two of them are at odds with one another, we're going to have a problem. And if you do have, you can call it a splinter net, but if you have a divide and you have your technology, I have my technology, I'm not giving it to you, then they will have their technology, I will have mine. And then if I'm in a third country, what do? I mean, carrying two phones is the least of my problems. But to be able to work together as one humankind to make technological progress and breakthroughs and to develop new solutions to problems which we all share, it means that you have to give a lot of that up, and then in addition to that, expend energy countering one another. And I think that's very bad news for the world.
Well said. Hope people are listening more broadly out in the system here. So I just wanted to shift a bit to, some of the examples you moved. I mean, the government here is moving at a very fast pace. The online ability to be able to get, your passport, anything in the system. Thinking about the societal implications of this, what that means in terms of, I don't know, education or skills, just what are the things that you not worry about or think are going to be most critical to ensure it's kind of a stable, and we don't have Luddites, I think, as you mentioned.
Well, you've got to look at it both on the supply and demand side. On the demand side, you must make sure that everybody feels that they can access these services. And there will always be some proportion of the population, particularly the older ones, perhaps not so well educated, who are not comfortable doing things online, for whom this is not natural, and you go there and you're not sure, where do I start? And maybe they don't even have a device. And so we have to make a big effort to carry them along, make sure that they feel that they get the help they need, and they don't feel that they are left behind. And we have those schemes. We have young people helping old folks. We take an iPad with them and walk them through the process. We take them to make a small transaction, give a hong bao to their grandchildren. You can do that online nowadays without a physical packet. And I think it's partly psychological, but it's also a real problem to be solved. On the supply side, the changes mean that jobs are going to be affected, and you have to be able to take care of the people whose jobs may change in order to prepare them to go into new jobs, and maybe more, and probably more challenging ones, hopefully more rewarding ones. Come back to the financial services. The banks' habits have changed. People no longer go to tellers, in order to do a lot of transactions, because the ATMs are so much smarter now. So large numbers of tellers are going to be redundant. What do you do with them? If you left it to the market, the banks may say, well, I'll pay you off, you retire early, and then I'll hire young people, and they will become tech advisors to the customers who are coming to use the systems. But I think then you'll have a dislocation socially. So we've put a lot of effort in, and the banks have worked with us to put effort to retrain their staff so that from being a teller at a counter, they've now become a manager of multiple ATMs. And when the customer runs into a problem and presses help, and the face appears on the screen and say, can I help you? Is not a deep fake avatar, but a real person who can empathize and talk him through the problem. So you're talking about thousands of people, and that's just Singapore as one city. So if you're talking about a big country, you're talking about millions of people. It's not easy to do, but we have to make the effort.
Is that a topic amongst the smart city network you're talking about? Or
I think it will be. Yeah. I think it will be. We are probably further along the way than the others, but it will help. It will affect all of them too.
Right. Well, I just want to ask one more question so we can make sure we get the input from the audience. And just more on a personal note, if you don't mind, on leadership. You in your career as a leader have gone through many transitions, right? I think about the financial center that was set up when people didn't think Singapore would be a financial center, and you built it and you're driving it. as you look back, what would you teach your younger self as sort of the thing, if you were now looking at this and you're looking ahead, what are some of the most important things skills that you'd want to have as you think about this transition coming up, based on what you've gone through before?
Well, it's the tech part is just the tech part of it. It's the non-tech part of it which is difficult, which is to be able to accept a new way of doing things and to be able to change our organizations and our processes in order to take full advantage of what has now become possible. That is very, very hard. You can do it once, and you think you've made a tremendous breakthrough, and we started computerizing our systems probably in the 60s, early 70s. But actually, you have to reinvent yourself many times. And that is extremely difficult. I mean, you look at a company like Microsoft, which is one of the best companies in the world. They started off, first they made DOS, then they made Office, then they tried to reinvent themselves to become an IT company. But actually, they didn't capture all the apples on the tree. I mean, many other companies came along. And Bill Gates says he should have made Android. So it's very, very hard to keep on reinventing yourself. And in our case, if we don't reinvent ourselves and somebody else comes along and picks the apple off our tree, we won't have lunch. I think that is a lesson which Singaporeans and we ourselves, not just the population, but we ourselves need to know and remind ourselves every morning that we have to keep on being prepared to reinvent ourselves. And sometimes to cannibalize ourselves, because otherwise somebody else will do it to you.
Excellent. So you really are a geek, if I might say. I mean, that's what you find me saying in this. But do you mind if we switch now to just some questions? I thought we'd start with the audience, maybe do clumps of questions and take 3 questions. So we have microphones set up out here, so anyone want to start, or I'll go to Slido.
Oh.
Pardon, where I can't,
Question.
I'm blind. Okay,
Question here.
Oh, sorry about that.
Hello.
So my name is Kevin. I'm one of the co-founders of Gojek. So I wanted to thank you, Prime Minister, for being here today. So Gojek actually set up a engineering and data science center in Singapore a while back. Today we have, I think, more than 100 software engineers and data scientists in our Singapore office. And we've seen that over the years, the demand for engineering talent based here out of Singapore has just grown exponentially. You have local companies, regional companies, global companies setting up here. And so we're seeing that the demand is far outstripping the supply, which is a great problem to have as a nation. But selfishly, my question is around wanting to understand, what is the government's strategy to continue growing the supply of this technical talent that's going to continue to rise exponentially in terms of the need for these type of folks.
Excellent. If someone has a microphone and I can't see them, please. There's a question with a hand over here.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. So I love what you said earlier about recruiting tech talents back to Singapore and getting all of them back home. And we are there's a need of talents back here. Research also says that diversity is great for innovation, and I want to know, when will our regulation finally support a very diverse and inclusive workforce? Pink Dot is this Saturday. I would love to see the government coming out and being supportive of getting all the diverse workforce from overseas here, and also supporting the very diverse workforce that is in Singapore.
Okay.
Why don't we start with those two?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, first on engineering talent. I think we have always leaned towards producing STEM graduates from our education system. And we have biased the system to produce a disproportionate number of engineers, including IT and computer engineering. The students' responses have varied from time to time because if the property market is hot, they graduate from engineering and they may become property consultants. But right now, the IT market is hot and people have been coming. I think people have noticed it, the students have noticed it, and the quality of the students going into our institutions, the polytechnics and universities to study IT has gone up sharply. And I mean, wherever there's a shortage, we'll increase the capacity, but the flow will grow. We don't only have to depend on our own, we can bring in people from overseas. We welcome people from overseas, talent from abroad, and we welcome also Singaporeans who are overseas working and bring them back. I think, as you will know, the engineers among you will know that when you are dealing with IT projects, you're not just dealing with a number of engineers and coders because there's a mythical man month. You are dealing with making sure that the right person is in the right place and is empowered and can really be productive and deliver the results. And that is a matter for the management to make the most of their capabilities that they have and to make sure that they can build a team. And if they have a good team, more will come. I'm sure Gojek is doing that, and this is also what the government is doing, so I'm giving the government effort a small puff down here. On inclusiveness, I think we are open. You know our rules in Singapore. You can be whatever your sexual orientation. You're welcome to come and work in Singapore. We have an issue with the 377A, or some people have an issue with the 377A, which is our legislation on, I'm not sure what exactly the clause says, but basically it's against homosexual acts. Which remains on the legislation, and it will for some time, but it has not inhibited people from living. It has not stopped Pink Dot from having a gathering every year. And it's the way this society is. We are not like San Francisco, neither are we like certain countries in the Middle East. It's something in between. It's the way the society is, and I think in this framework, it is completely possible for us to have a vibrant tech and cultural scene.
Excellent. If people have questions, you can go up to the microphone, and I'm just going to. There's literally 75 Slido questions, so I'm trying to, including, by the way, even a question of what type of durian do you prefer?
What type of durian?
I think you may be in the wrong conference, and we have your name. So, but there is a number here around a number of questions around youth. What is it that youth and millennials can do to actually work on regulation? It's a question, or to look for seizing the opportunities. What are ways that youth and millennials can participate more?
Well, first, master a trade. Don't lightly drop out from university. I mean, if you're going to be Bill Gates or Steve Jobs or Mark Zuckerberg, by all means. If not, master a skill, make the most of it. At some stage, if you wish to start something, then I say go for it. The sky is the limit because the opportunities are here for you to be educated. It's the best you can get anywhere in the world. In fact, you can go to the best places in the world, and a disproportionate number of Singaporeans do that. If you look at the Ivy League universities or Oxbridge, we are hugely overrepresented compared to our population. So take the most of those opportunities, come back, make a difference first in your job, and then go out and change the world.
There's some questions on R&D, the importance of R&D. Some saying that should we be spending even more? Another question about, are we getting the impact from it? Has there been have we had a conversion of the R&D into a well-known tech company? So just maybe your sense of R&D.
R&D is a long-term business. You have to maintain a consistent policy. You have to spend over many years, and you have to have the right balance between demanding results and allowing the human imagination to roam. We have been spending about 1% of GDP as a government on R&D now for more than 10 years. Our idea is that this 1% we hope will stimulate 2% from the private sector, and that will bring us somewhere to the spending levels of what the developed countries are, and the results from R&D of what the developed countries are. We're not quite there yet. We spend 1% as a government. On the private sector side, it's about 2.5%, but it's not bad. We are beginning to see results. The emphasis for the R&D in the early years, particularly, we had put a lot of resources into biomedicine. We're beginning to see results there. We also have put bets onto infocom and media, and that we have not financed a unicorn yet, but we are still trying.
Excellent. Any questions from the audience? Okay, I'm just going to go here.
Go ahead.
A couple more. Is that just a few minutes for? There's quite a lot of questions again on the talent, like in the first one.
Yeah.
But the one question around, with China producing 1 million engineers a year, is there really an opportunity to do that? Be an engineer in Singapore? That was what is there? So how to think about that massive amount of talent there and what happens here? There was several questions around that theme.
You can have 10 million engineers in the world, but we need more engineers in Singapore. And you need quality engineers. There is not a surplus of engineering talent in the Silicon Valley.
Right.
I mean, you look at what the companies have been paying engineers. Not senior people, 40, 50 years old, but young people in their 20s and 30s. And they are very well rewarded. I mean, they are very productive, but it's also a reflection that the people who are able to do work and function at that level are not in such abundant supply. Right. And I think if you have talent, you will be able to have a good career for yourself.
There are then a number of questions around the displacement you mentioned just earlier. Just we have to take care of the people being shifted out, and saying, are there, to what extent should companies be responsible for taking care of the talent that they displace, or what is their role in that?
Well, if you're a small company, it's harder. If you're a large company, I think you do have a social responsibility. If you are in a big country like the US, you can say, well, I can't answer for this. This is a federal government's problem, and the government is here to help you. But if you are in Singapore, the government will help, but I think a company which is purely profit maximizing will not thrive in Singapore. You have to have a social conscience.
Excellent. Well, we're over time, but if you give me the liberty
ahead.
of asking one other personal question that's on here, I found it quite interesting. It says, you are known for your computer science background and that mighty Sudoku solver code. I didn't know you came up with that. What is the next code you were working on?
I'm open to suggestions. It's too difficult. These are things you can do one-off, but to be productive as an engineer today, you need to know so many things and to tap on so many pieces. And before you write any code, what you include at the beginning of your source code is already the work of thousands of man-years of other people. Packages, APIs, other people's systems, remote procedure calls. And unfortunately, I'm not in that business anymore. Maybe when I retire, I'll come back to it.
Well, thank you. Please joining me in thanking the Prime Minister.